This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
All right, so the Browns had an interesting game on Sunday. I wanted to give an extra day to get questions out about the game. So let's jump into the questions that you guys had after Sunday's game. First question comes from DSSD, who says, "Hey Q, what do you think Stefanski can do in the last 6 games to prove he is a coach worth keeping? What do you think he can do in these weeks to prove he should be gone?" Well, I don't think he has to do anything to prove that there's a case to fire him, unfortunately. I think that the case has been made. I don't know if he can add to it at this point. I think all the principal things you need to make a case to fire Kevin are already there. The lack of offensive production over 2 years. I don't think 6 games is going to change the narrative on that. Especially when he's not the play caller anymore. The shaky quarterback development over the last couple of years also not going to reflect well on Kevin, and just the overall lack of creativity and interest in this offense, that's not going to go well for Kevin either, right? If they wanted to fire Kevin, and whether you're somebody who wants to keep Kevin or not, because I think more of those people exist than I think the internet would have you believe. But whether you want to keep Kevin or not, you have to accept that Kevin has, the Browns have a justifiable case to fire him. The question is, how much slack will they cut him? That's truly the question. The case is there to fire him. If the Browns fired him at the end of the season, there aren't going to be a ton of people, even the Dan Orlovskis of the world, who feel like the firing is unjustifiable or unprecedented, right? It would be very justifiable and very precedented to fire a coach after back-to-back losing seasons. And that's just the reality of it. Again, what's going to determine whether Kevin keeps his job isn't if there is an argument for him to keep his job or not. There is an argument to fire him. It's going to be determined on whether ownership and Andrew Berry are going to be willing to cut him some slack because of the circumstances that this season has happened under and last season has happened under. That's truly the conversation. There's an argument to do it already. It's whether they feel like the slack that they're going to cut him is enough to keep Kevin at this point, or if they feel like too much damage has been done to retain him. I'm more on the side of I think too much damage has been done to retain him, but we'll ultimately see what the Browns do at the end of the year. O'Brien Brown says this. "Hey Q, love the content. Been waiting for years, watching for years. Appreciate that. Keep it up. Even though it's been tough lately, Q, what's the GM or owner doing to this Browns team next year? What do the trades look like? What do the drafts look like? And is our offense going to be completely reconstructed, or is it a couple of things we're missing?" So there will be things that are bigger projects, right, that aren't going to be solved in one offseason. Like the offensive line. You're going to hopefully be better at the offensive line and younger at the offensive line by the end of next season. But that project's going to take 2 seasons, right? It's going to take some draft picks this year, maybe some free agent signings to hold you over, and then some draft picks next year to fix that offensive line. Wide receiver, you can influx a lot of talent into wide receiver pretty quickly. Quarterback, that will be a change that happens pretty quickly as well. It's going to look like this, right? The Browns are going to spend a decent amount of resources as far as their free agency spend on wide receiver. It doesn't mean that they're going to spend on like the most expensive wide receiver available, but I would expect them to get another solid veteran to help Jerry Jeudy out on top of whoever they bring in the draft. I would expect them to retain one or two of their current offensive linemen and then maybe go after somebody new at tackle. And then at quarterback, I think they're going to use their top pick on quarterback. They're going to use their other first round pick on wide receiver more than likely. And I would expect the Browns to use 3 of their top 4 picks. So their top 4 selections in this draft. I would expect the Browns to use 3 of those selections on offense. Maybe they spend 1 on defense or something like that, but 3 of those selections should be spent on offense. So that's kind of what I'm expecting them to do this offseason. Michael says this, hey Q, if we did a number 2 pick, if we did have the number 2 pick, my bad, and let's say the Titans had the number 1 pick, what would it cost to swap? I have to look up how many times that's been done. So swaps within the top 5 haven't really happened that much in NFL history. So it wouldn't be the most common thing in the world to have happened. If we're talking about the number 1 pick, the closest thing I can find here is 2001, the Chargers and the Falcons swapped picks. The Chargers had the 5th pick in the draft. Well, the first pick in the draft. The Falcons had the 5th pick, and the Falcons gave up their 5th pick, their 3rd round pick, and a 2002 7th round pick for the Falcons' number 1 selection. So you're talking about a 3rd and a 7th to move up 4 spots, but that's in 2001. Right. The Bengals in 95 traded up to the number 1 pick from 5, and they gave up a 2nd round pick to do that. There's not a ton of examples here of like the number 1 pick specifically, but I think you could probably get it done. If the market was really, really hot, it would take at most a 2nd round pick. If the market cools on quarterback, maybe there's not a ton of teams trying to trade up to number 1 to get a quarterback, then I think you're talking about maybe, you could get away with a 3rd, maybe even a 4th round pick to move up 1 spot, because the team trading from 1, they're just getting an extra pick here. So it's just all value to them, because assuming they're trading that pick, they have no interest in taking the player that the other team would want, and the Browns are just trading up with the Titans in this kind of scenario to make sure that nobody else trades up with the Titans. So it would basically put the Browns in a situation where they would have to either pay whatever price is out there for that pick or be able to be a safer landing spot for the Titans. Because let's say the Titans have a great offer, right? Let's say somebody's offering 2 first-round picks for the Titans to move back from 1 to 7. Let's say the Jets are at 7, the Titans are at 1, and the Jets offer their first-round pick, so the 7th overall pick, and then an extra first-round pick. And then let's say they give up the Jacksonville deal, an extra first-round pick and a 2nd-round pick to the Titans to move up to number 1. That would be difficult for the Browns to compete with, and the Browns would not match that offer. But what the Browns could call and counter with is, hey, that's a lot of picks between 1 and 7. How much do you value whoever is the top guy on your board, right? If you're the Titans, and let's say you really want an edge rusher, and Arvell Reese is number 1 with a bullet on your board, but Ruben Bain's like 10th on your board, is it worth those extra picks to miss out on what you clearly have as a generational player? That's going to be the math that kind of determines it when you get to the Titans and why the Titans would trade the pick. We're so far away from knowing what the outcome of the draft order is going to be that I can't sit here and confidently predict anything right now, but it's going to be determined on a lot of factors, right? Some of the factors we talked about will be present if that becomes necessary, but I would not rule out the Browns' ability to be able to get the pick that they need just by being the Browns. that's tough, but that's just where we are. Master Tidester says, one thing I wonder about Shedeur is how he's adjusting to NFL coaching. Since he's had a dad as a coach for so long, I would assume a lot of his coaches' focus have been on grooming and developing him prior to the NFL. So I wonder if it's a struggle to be a backup who isn't getting the lion's share of attention from the coaching staff. I wonder if the Browns have certain assistants that are giving Shedeur the individual attention he might need to develop, or that they have the attitude that he has to adjust to what the coaches want, and it's not on them. And if it doesn't stick, do you have any insights? Well, in general, right, the way it works is that there are a lot of assistants on a coaching staff. And Shedeur probably works closely with a couple of those assistants, right? The guys he's throwing to, the trash cans, the guys who are setting that up. Those are the assistants out there who he's talking to, not the literal trash cans, but the guys who help him, right? There's some assistant coaches that help him out. And yeah, it's not going to be as one-on-one in the NFL when you're a 5th round pick, regardless of how talented people think you are. You know, it's not going to be as one-on-one as it is when you're at Colorado with your father. But to give Shedeur credit, it seems like the coaching staff has gone out their way to praise how Shedeur has responded to that environment. So I don't think that's been a problem for Shedeur in his development. I think he's been able to adjust to not having that individual attention. And I think that's good on him. So, you know, we'll see how he continues to develop. You know, I think there's internally a lot of concern about Shedeur's pocket habits, and he needs to unlearn them, and wanting to get him a whole year without like having to fall into those, like being tested in those bad habits, giving him a year off of dealing with like the pocket habits and stuff. Basically, like the way the Browns view it is he had such bad offensive linemen at Colorado that, you know, for some quarterbacks, when you have bad offensive linemen, you start seeing ghosts, you develop PTSD, right? Like, you know, not actual PTSD, but, you know, for lack of a better phrase, right? That's kind of what happens there. And for Shedeur, I think their hope was, hey, let's get this guy away from all of that, and hopefully he unlearns some of these bad habits so we can reinstall good habits new to him. And I think that's the big concern, right? I think the coaching stuff, the behind the scenes stuff, there was a point to where you were hearing things like it was shaky, but it seems to have gotten better over the last month. So that's really good. And, you know, you expect there to be a bit of a learning curve from anybody going from college to the NFL, because how you're expected to learn and go about it as a professional is going to be a lot different than it is when you're a college student, you know? So it's not unusual for a rookie to have that kind of a curve there. Cam's Cut Up says this: Q, you've said a top 7 quarterback would be what it takes to win with this offense. It's currently constructed, this year. I think that's the caliber of QB you need to win a Super Bowl. Do you think this class has guys capable of reaching that level, considering we need a new coach, offense, and a large infusion of talent? I don't think you need to have a top 7 quarterback to win a Super Bowl. I think you can do it without a top 7 quarterback. I don't think Jalen Hurts is a top 7 quarterback. I think the Eagles won a Super Bowl with him last year. But that being said, you know, do I think that there are guys in this draft class who can definitely get to a level if they're developed properly and they get the right tools installed, that they could be, you know, Super Bowl caliber quarterbacks? I think so. You know, I think that there are 2-3 guys potentially in this draft class that have those tools: Dante Moore, Fernando Mendoza, Ty Simpson. And we'll see what the pre-draft process, what more we discover about this class, but that's a really, really good starting point. And yeah, I don't know if they'll be top 7, you know what I mean? But I think they'll be in that caliber of quarterbacks you feel like you can win a championship with, you know? And then I think they'll be like, you know, Matt Ryan was not perennially a top 7 quarterback, but there were years where Matt Ryan was one of the better 3 quarterbacks in the NFL, right? I think it's kind of a similar situation with these guys. If they hit their best case scenario, which isn't guaranteed, but, you know, you got to take your chance when you get your chance. Chase says this. Hey Q, how are you feeling about Shador's pocket presence and decision making? Still not good enough to be a starter, in my honest opinion. Well, I'm a little concerned about like the pocket presence. I think everybody's concerned about the decision making. I'm a little bit more concerned about than I think the average person. I think there were some very concerning decisions he made in that game, and I hope that getting the practice reps this week will maybe make that better. We'll see. That's something I'm certainly going to be looking for when I watch the game this week. The pocket stuff, I don't think is going to be fixed in just a week of practice. Like, I understand, he now knows what his timer needs to be, but habits like that are just hard to unlearn. We've seen quarterbacks really struggle for years to unlearn those habits. So I think it would be unfair to expect like the pocket stuff to change overnight. But hopefully his decision-making looks a lot more sound, and there's less things I look at on tape and I wonder, why did he pull that trigger there? That doesn't make any sense given what the defense is showing you. Because that was the more concerning part to me in the short term, is like, hey, they're going to blitz him a lot. He has to make a lot of quick decisions. If he's not making decisions based on process, that could lead to a lot of turnovers. And I don't want to see him throw a lot of turnovers. Noel Cumpy says this. Hey, Q, love the content. If Myles Garrett breaks the sack record and has another 4+ sack season, 4+ sack game, my bad, and wins Defensive Player of the Year, do you think he could win Defensive Player of the Year? It feels wrong for a season like this to win nothing. Myles Garrett is absolutely on track to win Defensive Player of the Year. I don't think we got to worry about that. But another thing we don't got to worry about is our sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. All right, we're back. John Beto says, is it in the even if Stefanski is fired in the offseason, is it possible or realistic for the Browns to retain Jim Schwartz to coach the defense even with the new head coach coming in? I think so. I think Jim Schwartz wants to be a defensive coordinator. I haven't heard much desire of him to be a head coach. I'm sure, if the Browns offered him head coach, he'd probably take it. I don't think he would say no, but I also don't think he would be offended if, you said to Jim Schwartz, hey, we want to retain you. And then we'll hire somebody, and the gig is they got to retain you. If the Browns could retain that staff, I think that'd be the best thing for them. This has been done before with defensive coordinators. It's been done before with special teams coordinators. So I don't think it's a crazy concept. I think it's very possible to be able to do this, especially if you're hiring like a first-time head coach. I think Jim Schwartz works perfectly with them. If you're hiring somebody who might be a retread, somebody who's had head coaching experience, I think Jim Schwartz fits with them too. As long as the Browns are upfront and clear in the interview process, hey, we're keeping Jim Schwartz. And I think the candidates are going to look at the defensive numbers and say to themselves, yeah, that's not a problem, right? The Browns defense is really good. I'm pretty sure it would be a benefit to a lot of coaches to say to themselves, okay, well, I don't even have to waste time figuring out who the staff's going to be on defense. That's already handled. Now I just got to get my guys on offense and some guys on special teams and really work through that process. And the reality is, if this is an Andrew Berry-led coaching search or even a Jimmy Haslam one, the key word has always been collaboration between Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam and D Haslam. So that's probably going to be at the forefront of any conversations to bring in. It's like, hey, how do you do a collaboration? And part of that collaboration is going to be willing to accept that Jim Schwartz is going to be the defensive coordinator. And given how Myles is playing in this defense, given how this defense looks, given how this defense has developed talent, I don't see why a qualified offensive coordinating candidate would not want to take that opportunity. The only way I could see that being a problem for somebody is if they're so hooked on the buddy system that they see that as a negative because they can't hire one of their friends. But I've seen what the buddy system does with coaches. I'm good. I'm good not hiring the guy who doesn't want to take the job because you can't do the buddy system, right? So, yeah, I think it's very possible to keep Jim Schwartz. Jim Schwartz was the part of this process of bringing in Jim Schwartz was Andrew Berry, right? Like, he brought in Jim Schwartz from Philadelphia. He knew Jim Schwartz from Philadelphia. So it really wouldn't surprise me if Jim Schwartz stayed, given that is the hire on the coaching staff that Andrew Berry had a hand in, right? I don't think he was the lead in that, but he definitely had a hand in it. Tommy Rees, 2 games. What do you think? I think Tommy Rees has been pretty solid these 2 games as the offensive coordinator. The execution is still what it is. I think the play calling has been good. I didn't think the play calling was a problem before Tommy Rees took over, and I don't think it's a problem now. I think the issues on offense are just, they're not that good at blocking. They don't have great receivers. And when other teams have good corners that they can match up with our receivers, we have problems, right? And then also when teams can get pressure on our offensive line, don't got the time to get there, problems. So we'll see what happens. But so far, I'm not out on Tommy Rees after 2 games. I think he's done a solid job here. But that's it for QnA. Let me know what your questions are next week. Y'all have a great day. Having a better night. Peace.